which is very exciting. Another thing you need to be aware of, the Cincinnati Educational Justice Coalition has found some information about possible expansion of charter schools in Bond Hill and Price Hill. We have sent a letter to the Cincinnati School Board as well as Cincinnati City Council because there are some city council people, and including the mayor, who may be part of this undermining thing. The one in Price Hill, have they talked to the Price Hill Community Council? No. The one in Bond Hill, have they talked to anybody from Bond Hill? No. But these are all things that are starting to take place. People are buying up these properties for these purposes. So we've sent a letter to both the school board and Cincinnati City Council saying, okay, what's going on? If you're doing something, we want to know about it and why you're doing it. And gave them all the guidelines. Because if you bring in these two fly-by-night operations and have no rationale for bringing them in, the only thing it's doing is selling our children.
That's right.
Taking $7,000 a piece from these kids directly out from the Cincinnati School Board budget. $7,000 for them just to walk in the door. We only get like $4,700 for each child in Cincinnati Public Schools, but we have to pay out $7,000 for each one to any kind of charter school. And there's no track record of any of these schools being effective, being any more effective than our schools. So please be watchful of what's going on and see what happens about this charter school expansion. Because I think with everything we've heard, and talking to Kathy Ingram, they're still pushing the agenda in the legislature because there are still legislators in Ohio that want to charterize all of our public schools. It is still there, the same folks are still there, and they're trying to charterize, and they're still taking the money from the same people they took before. And they tried to put a bill in that would have guidelines on accountability, but guess what? It didn't pass. And so the whole legislature is still interested in privatizing our schools. So be watchful of that. So, you know, it never stops. Every day there's another battle to fight. So this is why we meet every week, so everybody knows about these things and is aware of what's going on, and start speaking to your city council people, the school board people, and your legislators. Thank you.
Thank you. Please write it out for Peter. If you have an announcement and you want it to get to our group, get it to Peter and he'll put it in our newsletter. There you go. So what happens is we do announcements first, and then we'll go around and get to you, okay? I didn't get a chance to talk to you before. So we have some announcements. One announcement is that it is Hanukkah, and I wish all of you a happy Hanukkah.
Oh, we couldn't tell.
If you couldn't tell, oh my goodness. My goodness.
The separation of church and state.
Yeah, well, we're not the church and we're not the state. And I'm just wishing you a happy holiday.
You're the state for us.
If you're going to get lit, that's a good way.
Yeah, this is one good way to get lit. What can I tell you? It's an old sweater, and I'm going to probably wear it until the batteries go out at least. Okay, for naturalization, we're filled up in December, but they haven't put out a list for the coming year, and I'm happy to tell you about any vacancies that come up. But right now, we're all settled for naturalization ceremonies for the rest of the year. We have that meeting for scheduling, so we know what's going to be happening in December through now. Just to announce, to tell you, we will not be meeting on December 25th. That's a Tuesday. We will not be meeting, which is a good thing because the restaurant's not open. And January 1st, we will not be meeting because that's also a holiday, and we will not be meeting. I'm trying to find out a day when my kids are going to be available, so I can probably get away for a couple days. Wouldn't that be nice? Okay. Other announcements? Oh, we've got lots of them. William, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, in terms of the school food thing and the realities of politics, in 2010, as chair of the food task team for the Green Cincinnati plan, I spent 2 years working on a proposal for healthier school food, and it passed unanimously through the Quality of Life Committee that Lori Quinlivan was chairing, and it got in front of council, and the mayor removed it from their agenda so they couldn't vote on it. And one thing I would like to encourage is when that meeting does occur, 85% of African American kids are lactose intolerant, and 2 out of 3 people in the world are lactose intolerant. And the requirement that every kid be given dairy milk is bad for them in many instances, and in fact in most instances. So I would just encourage to bear that in mind, not make it mandatory. For parents who want their kids to have milk, fine, but not make it mandatory.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Could you pass the mic to somebody in the back?
Yeah.
There you go. There we go. Sue.
Planned Parenthood is sponsoring a group discussion Thursday night. It's called Election Connection. And it's Bridget Kelly and the CEJC, Michelle Dillingham, and the AFL-CIO director, or somebody from AFL-CIO, the Young Democrats. Several groups are going to be represented there. They're going to have a group discussion of what's happening, what's likely to happen as a result of the elections, and how to approach the future in the state and locally with issues that all of us are concerned about. So if you want to join that, it's at, let's see, 4100 Coleraine Avenue, 6 o'clock Thursday night.
2 days notice, that's wonderful. Last time we had 3 meetings a Tuesday night. Do you remember? It took 3 meetings. I could only go to one of them.
4100 Coleraine Avenue. Mike says it's the Union Hall. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just wrote it down because I saw it on Facebook today.
It's the letter carriers.
Letter Carriers, Union Hall, 4100 Coleraine, 6 o'clock.
More announcements?
There, Marlena.
Marlena Brookfield, candidate for Cincinnati Public School Board.
Yay! Go for it, Marlena.
So I just wanted to piggyback on what Katie was saying earlier about the charter schools, because I had a, I'll say, interesting discussion with State Senator Lou Terhar on Facebook, which is the best political forum ever. And his whole thing, when I said, why is public money going towards private enterprise like charters and the private schools? And he said, well, the money follows the child. Okay, so then why is it that when they get their cut of our public school money, and then after a semester they send their rejects back to us, why doesn't the money follow them back to us?
Oh, that was a big thing for us when I was in public school. Because the kids would go for a few minutes to these charter schools, and they would keep the money for the year. And then they'd come back to us for the rest of the year because they weren't getting an education at the other programs. Any other announcements? Oh, wait a second, Gwen McFarland, is Gwen still here? Yeah. Here she is. Gwen is here. Hello, Alberta. Gwen is the head of our Democratic Party for Hamilton County, is that right?
That's correct. And I just want to thank everyone in this room who voted and also supports the democratic values and mission statement, and looking forward to continued victories with your input and your help and your support as a team. Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone, and thank you again for the great work that you do here every Tuesday.
Thank you, thank you. Other announcements? Martha?
Just quickly, you don't know about this, I'm sure, but the senior center in OTR still needs our support. And if you would write to the counselors, which I did about 10 days ago, and I followed it up now, then again, I don't know if a lot of you may know this better than I do, but you can write to all the counselors with one click. If you get the whole council on your email. I can't give you the exact address right now, but that's not hard to do, or I couldn't do it. But so to keep writing down, I usually hear back from them. Certain ones I hear back, and Tamaya Dennard was very upset about the center. And so but we need to stay behind them. So thank you.
There were two announcements in the back.
Yep, I saw them. Announcements.
One was Deb. Deb had her hand up. Bonnie.
Hats.
Bonnie has hats. Bonnie is in the back now.
Makes great Christmas presents.
Ooh.
Also, there's a pop-up gift shop over on Hamilton Avenue in Mount Healthy, and so my hats are over there too, along with my blankets and some ornaments that I made. But if you're looking for something different, and they're only open on Saturdays and Sundays.
There you go. Get your hats here in time for Christmas.
Bonnie has had to be a for a band.
Other announcements?
Yep, here we go.
Oh, here we
Bennett.
go. Bennett.
George Herbert Walker Bush died. He was the only guy that was president and CIA director.
There you go. Is that it?
Nope, there's another one coming. It's Mikey.
Mike.
Maybe I'm paranoid, but do we have another onslaught of racism in the going on with, like it started with Tracy Thomas, and then the fellow that was running community chest was run out all of a sudden, and Denard now, and what's the city council member who was a police officer?
Wendell Young.
Wendell Young?
Wendell. They're putting heat on these guys. He was one of the few that stood up against the soccer stadium. But I wondered if anybody else noticed this. It seems like it's going on again. Just a thought.
I agree.
Yeah, Tracy Hunter. You meant Tracy Hunter.
How are we doing?
Looks like it.
I think we're there. I think we're there. Why don't you give that mic to Ollie? Ollie, come on up. And you're going to give your background. You're a University of Cincinnati student?
So no, I'm Allie Trianfo. I graduated a couple of years ago from Xavier University. I'm a Cincinnati transplant. So thanks for welcoming me and letting me stay.
Tell us about the University of Cincinnati and Xavier students. Okay, so with this, a lot of young Democrats. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for letting me come and represent the Young Dems. We are a group that has been in and out of existence for as long as I've known it. Young Dems was active several years ago. You might remember that Bridget Kelly and James Wolfe, now two incredible elected officials and leaders, used to be the president and vice president of Young Dems about 10, 12 years ago. Young Dems was kind of dormant for a few years, and we just celebrated our first year anniversary being an active organization again. With that comes some challenges. It's really exciting to be re-engaging folks. We started off right around GOTB time for the 2017 council elections, and have been really hitting the ground ever since, organizing canvases, phone banks, volunteers, training our own Young Dems to work as campaign staff on candidates' campaigns. We've had members who are campaign managers, volunteer managers who worked for ODP, who have gone up to Columbus for a cycle, back down, who are gearing up for 2020. So making sure that our generation, our young folks are ready to take on the torch and keep on knocking doors all day long. Knock doors, knock doors, knock doors. That's one of our big things. So yeah, we're new. Our board is composed of 4 folks, that's it. And we have a group of about 300 members. I would say maybe only 25 to 40 of those are active, depending on what's going on. Most of our events are campaign related, helping out candidates. We were really focused in on Aftab and Jill's election this past round, as well as helping a lot of the judicial candidates who traditionally don't get the kind of attention, fundraising, support, and visibility that our top of the ticket does. So we were really focused on that local level and not just focusing on Cincinnati, which is where I live. I'm assuming it's where most of us here live and where our board is. We tried to help engage with Jessica Miranda, which thank goodness we got those 56 votes to tip her over the edge to flip another state house seat. So that was amazing. So focusing on not just City of Cincinnati, but Hamilton County as a whole helps us engage some more folks, bring in different perspectives from across the county, and that I think makes us stronger. It's just a different kind of obstacle that we have to organizing that I think a lot of other groups are feeling as well. We're growing, we're trying to get more visibility and attention, try to go to as many places as we can. And with that, we're trying to educate our members, because I think especially with young people who didn't grow up in Democratic households or in families where politics was really strong or a huge part of their lives, we cling to issues more than we cling to parties. Some of our largest events have been around gun violence. Our largest events have been around workers' rights and labor. We had a Labor 101 panel where we invited labor leaders from all different industries to come and talk about what's the history of labor, what are the current fights, and what can young people who might not have grown up in a labor household or who themselves aren't members of an organized labor union do to support the movement. So these are things that we're trying to really expand, especially in 2019, as we have a little lighter cycle, not by any means any less important, but trying to focus in on some of the issues that we can really strengthen ourselves around and find a core connection with the other young Dems in the area and other organizations so that we can build the strongest coalition that we can for moving forward. So, does anyone have any questions about Young Dems? The top question I will say is, what is our age range? And we definitely take honorary Young Dems, so welcome to the crew. Officially, the age is 21 to 40, but anyone is always welcome to our events. Anytime that our event's at a bar, if you do have children or grandchildren who are younger but want to be involved, we work out something that people under 21, college students, can also attend so that nothing's prohibited from people attending. We just want everyone to be involved.
So I'll have a question. What caused the period of moribundity? So
a few times it's been a couple things. Young Dems has always been a smaller organization, so as its leadership has gotten older, have gotten jobs that maybe don't have the kind of flexibility to come and go and spend that kind of time commitment. As leaders step away, it's been hard to fill those gaps. A couple of years ago too, I think one of our more recent deaths of the organization, we endorsed, not we, myself, but the organization endorsed a separate set of candidates than the Hamilton County Democratic Party, which is a no-no. So we really value the relationship with Gwen. We've had an awesome one with her so far. So she's been incredibly supportive of Young Dems, young people getting involved, and that's been really helpful. Just keeping those connections, making sure that we train whoever is going to be the next leaders of the Young Dems. We're approaching our own internal elections, so our outgoing president is training whoever will be the new president and vice versa for all that. So Ellen, yeah.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm Ellen Beerhorst. What is your role, Ally, number one? And is there a budget, and where do the funds come from? And how could a young Democrat wannabe find you?
Okay, sure, that's a great question. So I am the secretary of the Young Dems, so I do mostly all of our communication. So we have an email list that we send information out pretty regularly. My role as secretary, I go to different events such as this, and help plan the logistics of meetings. We do have a treasurer as well who helps with our fundraising. Most of our funds, we have a chunk that comes from membership. So the Young Dems membership is an annual fee. It gets you to any event, free drinks at those events, free food at those events. So we try to make sure, like, once you're in, everything's price inclusive, so we don't want anyone to not come because they feel like they can't afford it. And we do waive fees, membership fees too, if that's ever an issue for anyone. In terms of how to find us and where some of our other money comes from, Labor has been incredibly supportive of Young Dems. We have a really great relationship with them, especially the AFL-CIO and UFCW, Local 75. Bill Benner from UFCW is one of our members. He's a Young Dem and a political organizer, so we have that really great relationship. We try to host our events at union halls as often as we can. So they've been financially supportive of us in a lot of our programs that we do. In the past, we've gotten some quote-unquote grant funding from the party to hold certain events or to help us subsidize some space costs. But we're a pretty tight organization. We're pretty lean. You can find us, I left Peter my email so I can circulate that around, or if anyone would like to write it down. In the newsletter, sweet. So you can always get in touch with me personally. We also have an active Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram page. All of those are at Hamco Young Dems.
Hamco Young Dems.
Yes, Hamco Young Dems.
All one word?
All one word. That's our Twitter and our Instagram name. And then you can find us on Facebook too. If you just Google Hamilton County Young Dems, Facebook will be the first link, I believe, that pops up.
Well, I was just wondering if you will all graduate into our group when you get older.
We plan to, yeah. I think
That would solve the morbidity problem.
Morbidity problem.
We have no morbidity.
We're mortal, Peter.
They asked why there was morbidity in their group, you know?
Do you meet it on a regular basis?
so. We do, and it looks different in different months. So over the summer we had monthly standing meetings as happy hours with candidates. So we'd have the first chunk of the meeting just be a general, here's what's going on, here's the pulse of what's happening, what are ways you want to get involved, and then, hey, here's like a more fun meet the candidate or canvas or happy hour to tie everything all in. We do something at least once a month. We try to find a pretty consistent time. Usually it's the second Thursday. Don't hold me to that. It has had to change from time to time just with schedules. But we try to make at least something that we do monthly. And then during the campaign, when we were more active, we were doing something every week, whether it was a canvas or an organized phone bank or something else.
Okay, thank you. Let the young Dems know that the old Dems are here and welcome them.
Yes, thank you.
I'm going to go back here first.
How do you see your organization fitting in with the local party and the state and national? I presume there are other young Democrat things around the country?
Yes. So Hamilton County Young Dems is a subsidiary of the Ohio Young Democrats. So Ohio Young Dems, it's an organization based out of Columbus. They have legs and support to all of the county chapters. Not every county has its own chapter, but we are, we work pretty closely with the Claremont County Young Dems, especially in Jill Schiller's race this past year. We coordinated on some events together with them. But really, a lot of our direction, we're an autonomous organization, but we have some structural support from the Ohio Young Dems. We don't necessarily have to answer to them with things like our elections or decisions. We work really closely with the county party leadership, our president and vice president, Nate Simon and Umira Savani. They both sit on the executive committee for the county party, so they are part of those meetings and those decisions. But we know that there's more ways that we can get involved. So any way that we can start spreading our wings and branch into new groups and organizations, just to coordinate on some efforts. We never want to reinvent the wheel. We just want to try to bring some new energy into it.
I was wondering if you could have events at high schools or colleges and provide pizza that would bring them and explain some of the basic ideas of how we're different than the Republicans, because a lot of them probably don't have the foggiest idea, and maybe that would attract them with food.
Yeah, so we're pretty active on college campuses. UC and Xavier both have a pretty robust college Democrats organization that we do a lot of work with. As far as high schools go, it's difficult to get into those with party affiliations, but members of our group have been part of different programs or curriculums, gone back to their own high schools if they're from the Cincinnati area, and talk to government classes generally about how to get involved with that little, if you want to get in touch with me about democratic stuff, let me know. But there's a couple rules about, what we can and can't push ideologic-wise within a school.
There's been a lot of talk out there that it's been very hard to engage millennials into valuing the elections. What have you done to hopefully bridge that gap?
Yeah, so it's a challenge we have too. I mean, we have found though that it's a lot easier to say, hey Lori, come with me to an event on gun violence than it is to say, come with me to an event for Democrats. I think among millennials and a lot of young people who have grown up seeing a system that doesn't always work, even though that system has, especially in Ohio, been run by Republicans for most of our lives, it's difficult to want to be engaged in party politics. Engaging on issues is where we have our best, our biggest crowds, it's our most collaboration, it's our most engagement, and that's what really energizes people. When we have a meeting about gun violence or about labor, if we have a meeting about reproductive rights and Planned Parenthood, those meetings are always our best attended. So we try to really focus on issues. Why are we Democrats and what do we believe in is something that we're focusing on, and that helps engagement, is issues.
Specifically on what defines people as Democrats, do you work on any kind of position papers for spelling out what actually it means to be a Democrat? Because it's you hear a lot of stuff about the big tent, but I actually think more and more people would like to hear what are you actually for, and that means also, I wondered if you have any kind of newsletter or any kind of means of communicating with people to spell out positions on the issues you care about.
Yeah, we're working on all that. So in terms of our newsletter, most of it is pushing out an event that we're hosting. Other events like the Planned Parenthood event that you brought up about connecting with different organizations. We are building more on what our positions, what's something digestible and what does that look like in Cincinnati and in Hamilton County on these issues, like what's the local issue around that. We're not perfect at it, like I said before, we're pretty lean. All of our members, we're working full-time jobs, and this is kind of just what we do on the side. So we're trying to fill in best we can on these things, but I guess that's still the answer. We're just working on it. We'd like to have that. We'd like to have something on every issue. What's the background in the city? Who are the main players? And how can you get involved? But right now it's a little leaner than that.
Hi, we're just wondering back here, I've got the 2-year-old, if you're going to be at the Women's March in January?
Yeah, so we will be. We're not part, Young Dems is not part of either of the organizing committees. There's 2 marches happening that day. We will be attending, showing our support. We'll probably have a pre-meeting to that, like a poster-making party and a group of folks organized to, you know, hey, here's where we stand together, what's a certain chant that we want to do, how can Young Dems make an impact and splash. So we will be in attendance, but we're not part of the organizers.
She is the mother of the youngest Dem in the room.
I love it. We do have young honorary Dems as
Could
well.
you give details on the Women's March?
There are 2 different dates by 2 different organizations. Does anybody have clarity about the Women's March? They're both at Washington Park? Anybody know?
What's the date?
Well, we don't know which is the march.
Yes.
I thought it was, I don't know.
January 19th is when the marches are taking place.
Does it seem concerning to you guys that progressive Young Democrats were the main force, I believe, that got us back the House, the U.S. House? But we didn't flip any seats here in Ohio. We elected, didn't we, a few people to the state House, I believe.
Some judges.
But, I'm sorry?
And some judges.
Yeah, oh, the judges, yes. I mean, as far as this area, yes. Well, and the state Supreme Court. But, I mean, would you think of yourselves as progressive Democrats? I mean, or does that make any sense? Because I sort of like the groups around the country that did so well on November 6th. I just wonder.
Yeah, no, so we do consider ourselves a very progressive group. We also have worked with and recognized that gerrymandering is a really big problem in our state. And that's what's really, you know, hurt so many of our districts and our chances of flipping really important districts and houses. We have been, like, we've partnered with several organizations, including the Amos Project, on information sessions, gathering, getting folks together to know about what is this gerrymandering problem, what kind of impact is it having, and how can young people stay engaged, because that's something that it discourages a lot of people from wanting to get involved if you think, you know, I worked my ass off for AFTAP, excuse me. But look what happened, you know? Like,
you can,
after all that, how can I be engaged? Yeah.
You can say AFCAP.
So, you know, I mean, those are struggles that we have because it is frustrating, it is defeating when districts are drawn in such a way that no matter how you engage and how energetic you get, the result might not always, is not going to be what we want. And that's something else that we're trying to push, like, you know, not this time, but let's keep working for next time, and the time after that, and the time after that.
So last night on C-SPAN, Bernie was hosting an event in the U.S. Senate about climate change. And he had a number of young speakers, young participants, including, I think, probably the first climate rap ever heard on the floor of the U.S. Senate. So can you talk a little bit about climate change and where it is as a priority for you?
Yeah, so I'll say we did not have, it's something on our radar, we talk about it, we know it's definitely an issue. We're trying to support any kind of legislation that comes through City Hall that is supportive of measures that the city or the county can take against climate change. we've, know a lot of folks in the Department of Energy at the city who, in environment and sustainability, and we, try to support whatever efforts they have going on. We have not yet had a collective action as our own organization on climate change. We would love to. If there are organized efforts, we always like to send our support and do whatever we can. But I think it's something that's impacting us. It will impact me. It will impact my children and my children's children one day. And we're trying to stay as engaged as we can. I think we were very consumed with trying to get our feet wet on the election and make a stance there. So we were really focused on campaigns this past year. And this is the time to set our priority guidelines, and climate change is one of them.
Well, I just want to say it's not just about your children and your children's children, it's about you. And the recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says 12 years is all we have to make a difference, and then it's too late.
I was listening to National Public Radio. I was listening to the radio, and a very interesting thing about climate change that they talked about was the fact that it would change how we do our infrastructure, and that it could be an economic boom. And I think that might be important for college students who are going into different fields if they thought in terms of changing our infrastructure and our environment could be an asset to young people and all people.
Yeah, I agree. I think my last year at Xavier was when they made environmental studies. They changed it from a minor to a major. And in just the few years since I've been out of college and the times I've gone back onto campus, like that's something that a lot of young people are going into because of what's going on across the globe. Yeah, so I think that's totally right, and that's what we're becoming more engaged on that. It's a formal lesson now, and that's where a lot of our younger members are really driving home.
Do you have a sense of young people becoming more engaged and more concerned since the last election? Or I know that there's been a lot of numbers that show that the young people didn't vote during the last midterm, but they did vote this midterm in better numbers. But apparently, young people have become, over the last few decades, pretty complacent. But do you see a sense that that's improving, or do you have any idea?
I do see it improving. I would say even from, I was a college intern on elections in college before 2016, and before, I worked a race in 2017, and, I'd come back and even just talking to my friends about like, oh, this is what I did on the campaign today. People would be like, oh, stop talking about campaigns, no one wants to hear about politics. And now it is the conversation. And so I think people are becoming more engaged because it's more accessible. It feels more real. And on the local level, we've seen elections of young people who are incredibly engaged. Tamaya Gennard, one of them, always a great example of that. I worked for Greg Landsman, who wants to be a young Dem, despite the bald head. But he's really engaged with young people and on youth issues. And then even with our judges, a lot of our judges are younger. Candace Krause, who was elected to the Court of Appeals, is a young Dem. We had some other young Dems like Pavan Parikh running as well. So I think as young people are seeing themselves in these positions and running for office, and it's not just, oh, this is some older person I've seen in power before. This is my friend. This is the guy I knew before he announced that he was running, before I even knew what his party affiliation was. I think that's seeing more young people, that's engaging more young people. And we've got a long way to go. My generation's still got to catch up to y'all's with our numbers here, but it's on the right track.
Come on, guys. Let's have some more questions.
Hi, as a follow-up to Peter's comment about discussing vision and purpose as a Democrat, could the Young Dems maybe give a forum discussion for the party on bringing the DNC platform to Cincinnati and Hamilton County, for which all Democrats would be invited, or the entire public?
I think that's a great idea.
Helping to translate to the young people and all the way up, the older people who are facing a new Democratic Party.
I think that's a great idea, and I think now at like the beginning of 2019, that's the time to do it. That's the time to start setting our narrative about what the election's going to be, and that's got to involve everybody. So I like that idea. Thank you.
If you don't mind a loaded question. How do young Dems feel about the old Dems over 35?
They revered them.
We love y'all. I mean, like, we're new to this. Everyone on our board is new to this. You know, it doesn't matter that, you know, it's funny because someone will talk about their credentials and be like, well, I've worked every race since 2015. I'm like, that's great, that's 3 years. You guys have been doing this for a long time. It set the infrastructure of how this party works in the county. It shows, you know, you guys have put forward ideals and are keeping relationships. Lots of people have been precinct executives and know their neighborhoods and their streets and their neighbors for years and years and years. That kind of foundation is something that we don't take for granted. We want to engage as much as possible, teach some folks how to use Twitter, and
The devil's tool.
I think there's a lot of things that we can do to move the party forward, and there's a lot that young people can offer in terms of perspective that isn't always the first voice that's gone to, but we're part of the picture, and we're part of the solution, not the only one, and vice versa. So we want to just try to engage as much as we can and get ourselves at the table.
Question back here.
There's one right here.
Along that line, what's the upside and what's the downside of having Nancy Pelosi be the Speaker of the House from your perspective?
Talk about a loaded question. I won't speak for Young Dems on this one, just because we have not had a consensus around it. So, and I think that also goes to show how different perspectives in our Young Dems are. But I think I personally have a ton of respect for Nancy Pelosi. My mother's pre-existing condition would not be protected if it wasn't for the work that she did on the Affordable Care Act, and I will be very thankful for that. Sorry, whew, I did not expect that. But I also do understand the arguments that our country is changing, the face of our country is changing, and new leadership is, it's got to come, it's got to be necessary. I'd like to see more of our Democratic leaders from Pelosi down all the way to local groups, fostering relationships with young people and preparing our next generation of leaders, because it will be time for us to take the torch one day. And I think that there is a lot to be learned from the experience and the commitment and the years of drive. But there's got to come a time that we can have a discussion about what's next and who's next without clashing like this.
I'm curious about where young people get their information from. I read the newspaper, that's so old school. They don't watch TV as much as our generation, I don't think. I'm not sure where they get their information, the younger generation.
Yeah.
You're much closer to them, maybe you can help us understand. If we're trying to communicate with them, what's our best source of communication?
For better or for worse, I think we get our information from Twitter. For better or for worse, I think a lot of us get our information from Twitter. I think you're right about TV. Like, the only time I've seen the news recently is when I was sitting at the doctor's office, like live on TV. Everything's on my phone now. And it's articles that are shared, it's things that come out and hit the news right away, and then we can say, oh, okay, well, like, time to get on the CNN app and see what that's saying now. Or time to, I've seen 10 tweets about, this, let's look up, what's the New York Times saying. As Young Dems, we feel really responsible that we don't push out any information unless we have known that it's verifiable. Like, we're not just going to start tweeting random conspiracies or random stuff that comes across our feed. We want to be responsible about the way that we're disseminating information. But I think that's just where a lot of the news is. And I'll say, like, I'm 24. My sister is 20 years old, and she only watches news on Snapchat.
So Facebook is over also?
Here and there. I think everyone I know is on Twitter. Most people are on Facebook. So.
The danger of Twitter is that nothing is fact-checked.
Right. And that's like one of the hardest parts. All we have to do is, like, we have to just be careful about what we're sharing, where it's coming from, who's the source, and it's a big problem, yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you're such Twitterites, but I just hope that you tweet others as you wish to be tweeted.
Bill.
There are some people who would like to know what Snapchat is.
Oh, Snapchat is, it's another social media app where with your friends you exchange pictures instead of text messages. And after, like, let's say I say, you can look at my picture for 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, picture, in theory, goes away. So it's a short-term, different way of communicating. It's just one of the social media communication apps that's, it's really for, I think at its original intention, it was just something that was silly and funny and a little stupid, honestly. But now Snapchat has, you can look at your friends' stories. So, like, I could post, like, here at the Greater Cincinnati Democrats meeting. And then next to that, you could also watch, okay, CNN has a story, just like you would as you're clicking through something on Facebook. They have a story that rolls through with the news clips or links to articles. So it's just another social media platform. Tends to be a little even younger than my generation.
It doesn't need a trace, right? No trace.
Yes, yeah, so once you send something, in theory, after it's been viewed, it's gone.
Like electronic Alzheimer's.
He said it's like electronic Alzheimer's.
Right here.
Hello, how many active members would you say you have in your group?
We will pull anywhere from 25 to 65 folks at each of our events. our group is, we have more registered members than that, but that's our core folks who come to things and are, I would say, are pretty engaged.
Does anyone have any concern about the division based on age between young Dems and senior Dems? Is this a good way to organize a political party?
So I think that a lot of young Dems have felt as if the party is not accessible to them. Whether it's because I want to be involved in the party, but I can't run as precinct exec because the precinct exec in my area has been in this position for 30 years and, or is well liked by so-and-so, or is this person or that person. And I think we engage differently. We have, so for example, events like this, which is great to go to, and I'm really thankful to have a very flexible employer, but it's really hard for a young Dem to engage in this meeting during a work day. Later evening events, happy hour events, I think those are things that young people are already going to. So that's where we try to tap in our energy and plug in where we can be most effective to meet people where they are instead of, so that then we can bring them into the fold instead of, forcing them to.
Is this a long-term strategy? I mean, I understand why you're doing it now, but is this a good idea long-term? To be operating, is this a good idea long-term to be operating on somewhat separate tracks, even though it might be practical now? Is there any thinking about that?
My opinion is yes. I think that young people do need to have something that's their own to engage differently. When I'm older, there will be people my age now who are going to think differently than I do. And that's okay. We have a really great relationship with all of our partner organizations. We work really closely with the county party and with Gwen. We work really closely with the Southwest Ohio Young Black Democrats. And I think that we try to, it empowers us to get involved in the ways that we want and need to and feel like we have not had the opportunities to. And then those partnerships and relationships can help build both of the groups and organizations into something better.
I just wanted to respond quickly to a question earlier about frustration with election results in the midterms. Some statistics. The Republicans in the state of Ohio won 63% of House seats with just over 50% of the votes, and won 75% of congressional seats with 52% of the vote. So I think between now and 2021 and later, things are going to be frustrating for us. But the people of Ohio have decided that we're done with this crazy gerrymandering stuff, and hopefully the reforms that have been passed recently will, unfortunately not in the very near term, but soon help resolve some of those things so that those percentages and actual representation are closer. Also, thank you for your help on the Miranda campaign. I actually live where she is, and
awesome.
I was so excited to hear that she actually ended up winning the election, so thanks.
Thank you.
We have two more questions back here. You want to go with them?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
All right.
Just on where young people get their information, I think a lot of young people watch YouTube and listen to podcasts. I'm an old Democrat, but I love podcasts. Is there any way, your generation is wonderful with technology, could they perhaps make a YouTube video or put together some kind of podcast to instruct younger people on civics? Is there any way you could do that? And that way, if everyone here got the YouTube on their Facebook, it could go out even further.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a lot of folks listen to podcasts. Our issue has, again, been capacity with the amount of time that it takes to put in, the hours to create a clip, to edit it, and to get it out there on a regular basis. And we're working towards that to, bring more people in who may have more time, more expertise. But it's something we've talked about, but not that we're actively doing right now. I also think that sometimes the people who listen to podcasts especially are people who are already bought into that specific idea. Not many people who are unsure what they think about national politics are listening to Pod Save America. So we also want to, we're trying to grow our membership, get more folks involved for the first time, or those people who have said, oh, I've knocked doors once, but I haven't been back since. Finding ways to engage them different ways. And I think that's one of the great ideas, but we're still building our capacity around that.
Speaking of civics, our last question comes from our young school board candidate.
I can't speak for all young people, and now I feel like a horrible example of a young person because I just had to ask what Snapchat is. And in keeping with that, and what you said, something that we've talked about here before is having that long-range plan like the Republicans and the Koch brothers have had. They've had this game plan for a long time, and they've had the patience to see it come to fruition. We need to have that, and as much as I admit to getting on Facebook and getting sucked into it for a couple hours at a time, I also feel like these kinds of platforms are only contributing to making these things just about the immediate moment and being very reactive instead of proactive. And I don't have a solution of how we can fix that, but I know that going forward, we younger folks need to get that in our heads that, okay, we can't expect everything all at once, we're gonna have some losses. But if we just keep going at it and have that, this is our end game 20, 30 years down the road, have that always in sight, then I think we can get a little bit more engagement. Just spitballing.
Yeah, no, I think that's like totally right. And I think as we always, anytime we had a canvass or any kind of election event, we had a debrief afterwards. Usually pretty short, pretty informal, but we always ask what are the issues that people brought up at the doors. We would try to stress to folks, okay, I know that you're there with your script of, are you voting for X? How strong in support are you? Do you plan to vote? But try to make it more conversational. Ask somebody what's an issue that matters to you? Okay, they said education. Why don't you talk about the candidate, what education means to the candidates on the ballot? And now bring that back and what's being said about education, and then let's have a substantive conversation about that policy and what that looks like, and not just what's being said right now in the moment, but what are some good solutions that we can bring up to folks, and who are some good people who understand those issues, who can start running on those issues. That's step 2 of...
Can I respond to what she said in a second? I got a big enough voice I can say it. And Gwen, I want you to hear this. After every single weekend when we were knocking on doors, we were phone banking, we got a list of statistics about how many door knocks we did, and then the next week we were given a higher goal. So maybe we need to kind of change the message to not just how many doors are you knocking on, but what kinds of good conversations have you had with folks. It's about we the people talking to the people, and we need to get away from this thing, oh, we knocked on 350 doors today. Who did you talk to, and how are your conversations? So that going up all the way the train, because I had the same issue with the AFL-CIO. And we always had quotas. Every week was a quota, not conversations.
And let's hear it for the Young Democrats. All right. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you so much. We've done it again. You've come to another lunch and you've had another time with something else. And here it was. Young Democrats are working for our future. Listen,
Sid, I want you to know there's a future for you and the Young Democrats. Thank you very much for being here, 2 years old, and he's going to be with you too soon, too soon. I personally feel that we've got, rather than 40 years or 200 years, I think for me, it's next 2 years. I really feel that we can make a real difference in the next 2 years, and I'm hoping that we can make some real changes. But I look at what's happening in Wisconsin right now, where the Democrats won across the board and they're being wiped off the map by the outgoing Republicans. I feel like we need to do something to preserve what we're gaining here. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being here.
Next week is Brian Griffin from the AFL-CIO, who's going to be talking to you about why right to work is wrong for Ohio.
Right to work is wrong for Ohio is next week. Let's hear it for right to work, or not to hear it for right to work. Yeah. Next week, folks.